Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Center of the West. My name is Eric Rossborough. I'm Associate Librarian and Senior Cataloger. We're really pleased to have you guys here today. We've got Susan and I, Susan Fletcher, the Director of the McCracken Research Library, we'd like to thank. We'd also like to thank all the people that helped put this together. Sam Hanna, the guys in IT, Desiree and Jess in graphics, and as usual, it's a team effort that we can all do together. We're gratified by your support, and we will be having local lore in 2026. We are still formulating the dates, so stay tuned or give me a call. So today we've got a really excellent talk. Paul Hutton, my colleague, friend, and he's an expert. Today I introduce you to him. He is, if you haven't met him, he is American cultural and military historian, award-winning author, documentary writer, and television personality, Dr. Paul Andrew Hutton. He is the interim curator of the Buffalo Bill Museum. He's also Distinguished Professor of History Emeritus at the University of New Mexico. Paul is six-time winner of the Western Writers of America Spur Award and six-time winner of the Western Heritage Award from the National Cowboy Museum. You guys may know his most recent book, An Undiscovered Country, which has been on the New York Times bestseller list. He's got other books that you should check out, The Apache Wars, Phil Sheridan and his Army, and The Custer Reader, among others. He's former executive director of the Western History Association and former president of the Western Writers of America. He's appeared in more than 150 television programs, not a claim I can make. He's been on Disney Channel, the History Channel, CBS, NBC, CNN, and others. Today he's going to be talking about Buffalo Bill and the movies. And with that, I give you the distinguished, and you should check out his book. I've started it, An Undiscovered Country. It's excellent. Go buy it upstairs and get him to sign it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Paul Andrew Hutton.
Thank you, Eric, for that gracious introduction. Everyone hear me okay? We all right? Very good. In the cause of education, I've gone blind for my country like George Washington did, so I have various glasses because I'm too vain to get bifocals, so I cannot use one. And I'm getting to an age where I wonder, why in the world am I vain? You know, you kind of reach a tipping point, and I'm there. See if I can get this technology to work. I'm a real Luddite. There we go. So today I want to talk to you about Buffalo Bill in the movies. Buffalo Bill, of course, was America's greatest showman. In fact, one of the greatest showmen that the world has ever produced, and is instrumental in establishing the worldwide image of what an American is through the success of his Wild West. He never called it a show. His Wild West, which toured the world for 30 years and really established the image of the American West and the cowboy in the world. Who was the first actor to play Buffalo Bill in the movies? Well, it was Buffalo Bill, Bill himself. And he had perfected the role for over a quarter of a century on the stage and in the show arena. And one of his friends was Thomas Edison. And Edison invited his friend Cody to his New Jersey studio in 1894, where his cameraman captured the star along with several of the Indian performers that appeared in the Wild West. Certainly, Cody was one of the most photographed men in world history. And at the time, in the 1890s, that he was friends with Edison, he was at the height of his fame. Now, he lived from 1846 to 1917. He spanned a period of astonishing change in this country. We live in a time of astonishing change, but think about going from covered wagons to airplanes in your lifetime. That's pretty amazing. I think that's probably more shocking to the system than the invention of computers and AI. As a teenage boy, after his father was killed as a martyr in the fight against slavery in Kansas, he rode for the Pony Express, fought in the Civil War, After the war, he hunted buffalo for the Kansas Pacific Railroad. Now, of course, he earned his nickname that way, Killing Buffalo. And we all feel sorry for the buffalo. And of course, we're soon going to have a major exhibition here, Buffalo Nation, to celebrate our national mammal and its impact on our history. Cody was not part of the great slaughter of the buffalo. That came after he had ceased. He was always a hunter, but that came after he ceased being a commercial hunter, and he hunted for food, never for hides, which led to the great slaughter. By the time that happened, he was already on the stage. He was chief of scouts for the 5th Cavalry, was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his heroics, took the so-called first scalp for Custer in the Great Sioux War of 1876, and numbered among his friends people like Wild Bill Hickok, Sitting Bull, Ned Buntline, Generals Custer, Sheridan, Miles, Sherman. He lived the Wild West from 1846 to 1876, and then he simply took it on the road. First for 10 years on the stage, and then in his Congress of Rough Riders of the World, Buffalo Bill's Wild West. It was a romantic adventure, a gilded historical pageant, a combination rodeo and circus, and most importantly, it was always a tale of progress and heroism. And he took it around the world, and it gave the world their image of who Americans were. And certainly he was as important in the 19th and early 20th century as Benjamin Franklin had been during the Revolutionary era, in being kind of an exponent of rugged individualism and the American spirit to the world. Well, he was ever alert to new show business opportunities, and he turned to motion pictures in 1912 as the fortunes of his arena show declined. And this is an ad for his first effort in moving pictures. It was kind of like the AI boom today. Is putting a lot of people out of work. Well, motion pictures put the arena show out of work, and he sensed that. And so alert to the changes that were going on, he of course embraced the movies and thought that maybe it would save his sagging fortunes, because his show went bankrupt in 1913. And this is such an interesting ad. I just love this, from the motion picture world. And it really, it's Buffalo Bill and Pawnee Bill's Moving Picture Company. And in those days, there was no distribution system. So you sold the rights to your picture to various states, and bidders would buy the right. That's why it's talking about states' rights being available in this ad. Well, his film, The Life of Buffalo Bill, was a successful film, and it still exists today, which is amazing, because almost all those old nitrate silent films disintegrated and have vanished. He was very concerned about owning his own image, and at this time he actually sued another film company because an actor that was not called Buffalo Bill, but nevertheless had his Van Dyke mustache and goatee, and he did a successful lawsuit to say only he could look that way, because he was the original Buffalo Bill. So I mean, nothing ever changes, in show business. And he was anxious to retire, but his financial situation was precarious. I quote, "I am trying to get out of the show business. I haven't missed a single performance for 7 years," he wrote his cousin in August of 1912. "You see, I am compelled to work sick or well, and at 67, it's harder to pull myself together than it was 30 years ago. Boy, do I know how he feels." So the old man agreed to play himself in John O'Brien's The Life of Buffalo Bill. And essentially he dismounts, makes camp, and has a dream of past adventures that are portrayed on the screen by a younger actor. But it tells the whole story of his life. He wasn't happy with the percentage that he got from the production of the movie, and his association with his first effort ended in acrimony and lawsuits. And so, again, nothing ever changes in the Hollywood business. Well, this ad that you're seeing here from Motion Picture World declared the film to be a truthful record of the life of the only surviving hero of the Indian world, Colonel Cody is the last of a vanishing type of pioneer who passed into history before the invention of motography. The ad then made the connection between the historical frontiersman Cody and the show business Buffalo Bill. It says there's only one Buffalo Bill. For 30 years, he has been a drawing card all over the world. When he is gone, these pictures will have to take his place. And indeed, when he was gone, he dies in 1917, it was up to the motion picture to continue to tell his story. Well, Cody and his partner, Gordon Pawnee Bill Lilly, had merged their arena shows in 1908 as the market sort of started to dry up. And they hoped that the movie business might save them, but alas, it didn't. And Cody was stunned but not broken by his misfortunes, his economic misfortunes, and he felt that the movies might yet save him. And his next effort was a film called The Indian Wars, in which he enlisted the aid of old Army friends, including General Nelson Miles, who for a time was the commander-in-chief of the United States Army, and his old friend, the novelist, former soldier turned novelist Charles King, who was very popular at the end of the 19th century. And King wrote the screenplay, wrote the photoplay, and it was the story of all of the Indian Wars. And Cody was 67 in 1913 when he made The Indian Wars, and he stars in it. I mean, it is Cody throughout. The film does not exist. It has vanished, although we have a few stills from it. And this is sort of interesting. At that time, he was 2 years younger than his 20th century counterpart, John Wayne, when he made his last film, The Shootist. It's kind of funny. I think Cody always looks older. He had a little rougher life than John Wayne had. But he was actually younger than Wayne at that time. He said, "My object of desire has been to preserve history by the aid of the camera, with as many living participants in the closing Indian Wars of North America as could be procured." He and General Miles feuded during the making of the film. Miles wanted to go to every exact location where an Indian battle had taken place, which of course cost a fortune. And so the film also presented a very accurate depiction of the Wounded Knee Massacre, which upset the Army that had cooperated in the making of the film. And so the Army worked against distribution of the film. And it sort of got put away on a back shelf and vanished. So we don't have it anymore. And so it failed. It failed as well. Well, he dies, of course, in 1917. And with his passing, the country, about to march into a future of steam, steel, world wars, and international power, paused and reflected on just how far they had come. And that perhaps an epoch of American history had come to an end with the passing of Buffalo Bill. Theodore Roosevelt, in noting his passing, said Cody was an American of Americans. Well, despite his own failure as a filmmaker, Cody nevertheless had a profound impact on the new entertainment medium. The conventions, the plot lines, the storylines, action sequences, even the costumes of early Westerns owed everything to Buffalo Bill's Wild West. Few early films, however, dealt directly with the star himself. He was in John Ford's The Iron Horse as a minor character, kind of had a cameo, not the real Cody, an actor, and also in James Cruise's The Pony Express, where he's a little boy helping with the Pony Express, which is actually far more accurate than his adventures in the Pony Express are usually portrayed. And he was in William Fairbanks, seen here, played him in Tim McCoy's Wyoming, which was made in 1928. The only silent feature on Buffalo Bill with Cody as the starring character was Frank Madison's With Buffalo Bill on the UP Trail. And this was part of a series of historical films produced by a fellow named Anthony Zidius. The others were on Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, and Custer. Roy Stewart, who played Cody, made over 100 silent films, including the classic Sparrows with Mary Pickford in 1926, but he was sidelined by sound. He had too high-pitched a voice to be able to make the transition to sound. Technology, of course, has an impact all the time. The plot was loosely based on fact, with Cody attempting to found a town along the rail line, only to have the line snatched away by scheming politicians. And so he was not successful as a town founder, but that's the only bit of history that is connected with the film. This film actually still exists. You can get it on video. A more dramatic depiction of Buffalo Bill was by Duke Lee in the film In the Days of Buffalo Bill with Art Acord. And this was a kind of a big budget silent film, and a story of in the Indian Wars, and Duke Lee, of course, was a stalwart Buffalo Bill, and there he is. And he actually returned to the role in another film released later, Buffalo Bill's Last Fight. Doesn't look much like Buffalo Bill, but a pretty interesting depiction of Cody. He appeared again in the form of Jack Hoxsey in a film called The Last Frontier. And in this film, Buffalo Bill and Wild Bill come into conflict with the star, played by William Boyd. That's the future Hopalong Cassidy there as a young actor. And you can still see Bill here trying to get Wild Bill to behave himself and not shoot Hopalong before he can become famous as a star. So hardly very dramatic depictions of Cody. The decline of Western films in this period, in the early days of sound, relegated Buffalo Bill's character to the serials and to budget Westerns. Sound equipment was heavy, it was bulky, it was difficult to move out on location. Westerns are, of course, action films in which location usually is a character in the movie. And so, if it wasn't studio bound, it was very difficult to make. And so the studios just shied away from certainly big budget Westerns. Serials and B-Westerns, budget Westerns dominated the period. And so Buffalo Bill made a few cameos, like here in The World Changes with Paul Muni. Douglas Dubril is playing Buffalo Bill. This is actually the story of the meatpacking industry. It's a crazy movie. It goes all the way from the frontier to the rise of Chicago and the meatpacking industry. And Tom Tyler played him in a Buffalo Bill film in which at least he looked more like Buffalo Bill. And he had a cameo in Tom Mix's final film before he was killed in a tragic car wreck called The Miracle Rider. And here's a kind of a rare still from that film. And was also in a serial called The Flaming Frontier. But these are the kinds of films that featured Cody during the period. So not historically accurate in any way, and certainly not biographical. And you probably didn't know this, but he was a great singer, played the guitar beautifully, and had a wonderful Palomino horse called Trigger. And no, he didn't have any of those things, but Roy Rogers did in Young Buffalo Bill. Roy did a whole series of his story. He was Billy the Kid, he was Wild Bill Hickok, and he was Buffalo Bill, and he would sing his way. And this reflected the kind of changes going on in the Western film with these B-Westerns, because this was the era of the singing cowboy. Because you could record the songs on the stage, and then you put Roy on his horse, he'd ride along and pretend to sing, and so this worked out great. But of course, you don't go to the movies to learn history. You go to the movies to be entertained, and that's what these films are all about. Well, history did finally come back to the story of Buffalo Bill with the film Annie Oakley. The screenplay by Joel Sayre, who had written Gunga Din, and John Twist, who wrote films like Colorado Territory, Helen of Troy, the FBI story, tells how young Annie beats shooting champion Toby Walker Preston Foster in a contest that lands her a contract with Buffalo Bill's show. And although courted by show manager Melvin Douglas, she has only eyes for Toby, but their romance is sidetracked by their rivalry as shooters. If that sounds familiar, of course, the plot is completely stolen for Annie Get Your Gun, which we'll discuss in a minute. Sitting Bull, Richard Davis Thunderbird, a.k.a. Chief Thunderbird, one of the most important Indian performers in the 1920s, 30s, played Cupid, reunited the quarreling pair so that they live happily ever after. Buffalo Bill in the film was played by character actor Moroni Olson, and he's kind of an affable, folksy father figure to Annie, but his main concern remains show business, and there's not even a reference to his heroic past. He wears a business suit or a stage costume at all times and often confers with his pal Ned Buntline about imaginative press releases. Now, one of the best things about this film, and it shows up, I was going to say on The Late Show. I guess there's no Late Show now. It's all streamed. So you can actually get this film and you can see. It's actually excellent film. A very early Barbara Stanwyck before she became a big star. The film features some lively recreations of Cody's show. And the people making this movie all went to Cody's show and saw it as kids. And of course loved it, and so they do a real loving recreation of it, and so it gives you kind of a good idea of what the show was like. Its connection to the later stage show Annie Get Your Gun is strikingly apparent. The other big film that was made featuring Buffalo Bill in this period, here you see a European version, a novelization of the screenplay, which calls it Buffalo Bill. And this often happens in Europe with a number of films. Buffalo Bill is such a powerful calling card in Europe. He really is more famous in Europe in some ways than he is in the United States. So even a film as big as The Plainsman, which is the story of Wild Bill Hickok, with Gary Cooper in the starring role, changed its title to Buffalo Bill in the European version. And indeed, James Ellison's Buffalo Bill is a junior partner in a trinity of frontier heroes that includes Wild Bill Hickok, Gary Cooper, very glamorous Calamity Jane, played by Jean Arthur, and of course, Cody. The screenplay by noted historical novelist Harold Lamb, credited story material from Courtney Riley Cooper, who was an early press agent for Buffalo Bill and helped Buffalo Bill's widow, Louisa, write her memoirs, which are on sale in our gift shop, as part of the papers of William F. Cody that we publish here at the center. The film is equally remarkable for its fidelity to minute historical details and authentic costumes, as its wild disregard for all historical fact. I love this. It's one of my favorite films of all time. And it's so great because there's a scene in General Custer's office, and they got the wallpaper in Custer's office absolutely correct from a famous photograph of Custer's house at Fort Abraham Lincoln. That's the only thing accurate in the movie. I mean, it's amazing at the end, Wild Bill Hickok is actually killed, and there was a huge argument with the producers over that, but DeMille said, no, we got to have Bill die at the end. So, but here's James Ellison as and Helen Burgess as Bill and Louisa Cody, and the plot line really revolves around the place that Bill has married, and she wants him to open a hotel and settle down, but a man's got to do what a man's got to do, and that's not going to happen. And actually, that is historically accurate. I mean, they had a very troubled marriage, and it begins right away when she wants him to settle down, and he says, no, I think I'll go out and scout for the Army, honey. See you in a couple of years. And that would continue throughout their long time together. Cody's recent marriage to Louisa and his attempt to settle down is a running joke throughout the entire film. The tortured romance of Cooper's stoic Hickok and Jean Arthur's glamorous Calamity Jane dominates the plot, but's never allowed to get in the way of plenty of rousing action. This is a big action Cecil B. DeMille epic. It's just really a lot of fun. In the climax in Deadwood, Cody arrives too late with the cavalry to save Hickok from his fatal date with Destiny in saloon number 10. Well, despite its historical flaws, and here's DeMille coaching Ellison and Burgess on their screen roles. Despite its historical flaws, The Plainsman was certainly the biggest and most successful Buffalo Bill film of the decade. In fact, certainly of all time up to that time. Turning a nice profit of $1.2 million on a budget of $900,000, and $1.2 million was really $1.2 million back in the 1930s. We're talking some real money here. DeMille had initially intended that Hickok and Cody would be of equal presence in the film, but you know, if you're going to cast James Ellison as Cody, and you're saying, who's James Ellison? That's right. And Gary Cooper as Hickok, I mean, it's inevitable that Hickok story dominates the film. DeMille briefly entertained the idea of casting Jimmy Stewart as Cody, but decided on Ellison instead. And that was because he was already under contract to Paramount, so it was easier to get him. DeMille and Hopalong Cassidy star William Boyd were close friends, and the director regularly screened every Hopalong Cassidy film at his house. He was thus familiar with Ellison's work as Hopalong Cassidy's sidekick in that long series of B-Westerns. But The Plainsman did nothing for Ellison's career. He didn't become a big star, and he returned to being Boyd's sidekick in more Hopalong Cassidy films throughout the 1930s, and kind of finished out his career doing light comedies. But of course, Hopalong Cassidy's films were then became a standard fare on early television, kiddie fare on early television, so Ellison had a little more fame. Budget westerns were to be the fate of Buffalo Bill as well, just like they were for Ellison. There were several Buffalo Bill kind of potboiler budget westerns. I mean, it really wasn't Buffalo Bill, it's just the name of a character doing a standard sort of B-Western fare. And there was even a Bill Cody Jr., an actor who changed his name to that. Jay Wilsley was his real name, and who had some success as a B-Western actor in the 1920s and 30s. Well, Buffalo Bill's biggest appearance on the screen was going to be in Joel McCrea's film of the same title. He finally received the Hollywood epic he deserved when Darryl F. Zanuck greenlit Buffalo Bill at 20th Century Fox. Now, this film is something of an orphan, all but disowned by its legendary director, disliked by several of its stars, and generally dismissed by film critics at the time and since as terrible. It was, however, a spectacular success with the only group that really matters, and that is the movie-going public, and it was a huge box office success. Director William Wild Bill Wellman, famed for his work on Wings in 1927, the first film to win the Best Picture Academy Award, as well as Public Enemy, A Star is Born, Beau Geste, always claimed that the idea for Buffalo Bill came from famed writer Gene Fowler, pictured here. And Wellman and Fowler were neighbors in the then rustic Brentwood area of West Los Angeles, and they had worked together on The Call of the Wild for producer Zanuck. And so Fowler came up with this idea that they should do a Buffalo Bill film. And he was a Denver newspaper reporter of some fame who later went to New York, where he became even more famous in the newspaper business, was a pal of Damon Runyon's, and his cynical writing style was often reminiscent of that of David Runyon. He eventually went back west to Hollywood, where he wrote over a dozen screenplays, including White Fang and Billy the Kid, as well as several books. Among his large circle of Hollywood friends, Wellman, W.C. Fields, Errol Flynn, John Barrymore. So he really moved in great circles. His autobiography is a hoot. He wrote several books. Fowler was, in fact, at Barrymore's bedside in Barrymore's last hours, and he always claimed that the great actor's final words to him were, "Tell me, is it true that you are the illegitimate son of Buffalo Bill?" Well, this inside joke came from the fact that Fowler had won his reporter's spurs for the Denver Post with an infamous interview in which he had pressed the aging showman about his amorous adventures rather than his frontier exploits. And the Colonel had not been amused by this. Despite their rough start, they became eventually fast friends, for Fowler developed a begrudging admiration for the old man. He wrote, "He was perhaps the handsomest American of all time. And as a symbol of adventure, he was envied by men, beloved and spoiled by women, and emulated by growing boys. He set his white stallion like a dream prince, and every time he shook his long curls, the lassies of many towns suffered the amatory jitters." So Fowler was enamored of Buffalo Bill, but he also kind of felt that much of the legend of Buffalo Bill was a fraud. So he approached Wellman and he said, let's go ahead and write, this great film about Buffalo Bill. "Bill," said Fowler as he wiped tears from his eyes, though after they had worked for 3 months on the screenplay. "Bill," he said, "we can't go through with this blasphemy of the biggest hero the kids have. Not necessarily our kids, but all kids. Old kids, their grandkids. Christ, it's like shooting Babe Ruth or sticking a knife in Jack Dempsey's heart. If we ever made this movie," because it was a very negative depiction of Cody, "if we ever made this movie into a picture with our names on it, we would be the worst sons of bitches of this or any other generation. Our kids would disown us. You wouldn't want that, would you?" So they drank a lot of really high-grade whiskey and burned the screenplay in the fireplace. Although I don't know that. I think there may be a little exaggeration there. I don't see fireplaces in Brentwood. Nevertheless, at least that's the way William Wellman always told the story. Well, Harry Sherman, well known for his highly successful series of Hopalong Cassidy westerns with William Boyd, sold Zanuck on the idea of a big budget biographical film about Buffalo Bill. And the Hollywood Western had long, of course, been out of favor, and few prestige Westerns outside of DeMille's Plainsman had been made, but they were making a big comeback. Stagecoach in 1939 changed everything, and suddenly the Western was a hot property again. Many of these new Westerns were based on history. Dodge City, Santa Fe Trail, They Died with Their Boots On about Custer at Warner Brothers. Drums Along the Mohawk, Frontier Marshal, Jesse James at Fox, Union Pacific at Paramount, Arizona at Columbia, Northwest Passage and Billy the Kid at MGM. And so, indeed, off Zanuck went with his idea. They gave credit to a story by Frank Winch, a short story called Pahaska, which had absolutely nothing to do with the movie, but they just bought a property so they couldn't get sued by all the authors of Buffalo Bill books that they were pilfering material from. The film was budgeted at over $2 million, which was a very generous budget for the time. And it was to be shot in Technicolor, which was a really big deal. Zanuck wanted Wellman to direct the picture because he was a master of action. He didn't want to do it, but he owed Zanuck a three-picture deal. Zanuck wanted him to direct, had not wanted to make the Oxbow incident, Walter Van Tilburg's Clark Western story about lynching, which was a hot topic at the time in America. And but it was a passion project for Wellman, so he said, "I'll let you make Oxbow incident, which won't make a penny for the studio, and he was right. It was a huge bust, although it's a classic Western. But then you have to make Buffalo Bill. So the studio hired Joel McCrea to play Cody at this point in his career. This handsome leading man, and he probably is almost as good looking as the real Buffalo Bill, but not quite. This is probably the only time in history in which the historical character is better looking than all the actors who play him. Because Cody was a good looking guy. But he had appeared in only a handful of Westerns. Later, Westerns would be a staple of his career. He liked Wellman, and he and Wellman worked well together. And indeed, he made at least a good-looking Buffalo Bill. Maureen O'Hara, and this is Cody leading the cavalry to Warbonnet Gorge, they call it, instead of Warbonnet Creek, for his great duel with Yellow Hand. Maureen O'Hara was cast as McCrea's leading lady, and by then she was known as the Queen of Technicolor on account of her porcelain complexion, red hair, and green eyes. The inventor of the Technicolor process, Herbert Kalmus, in fact, gave her that title. She actually hated working in Technicolor because it required intense lighting, and it hurt her eyes, but technology kind of dimmed the lights down a little bit for the process. And in those days, this is the old 3-color Technicolor process, which is really rich and beautiful. These films are just a joy to watch, just to see the Technicolor. She actually felt, she hated the film, and she felt that Technicolor is what saved it. She said, though Buffalo Bill was my third picture in Technicolor, it's the one that best shows how using color could sometimes save a bad picture at the box office. Moviegoers then watch color films with the same wonderment that audiences do dazzling special effects today, forgiving almost every flaw in a story, performance, and direction. And it's just the color was such a fabulous, fabulous thing to see. And she didn't feel that McCrea was right for the role. She felt someone like John Wayne would portray the toughness of Buffalo Bill. McCrea actually knew exactly what he was as an actor. He later wrote about acting. I often had people tell me that an actor should be able to play anything, but I always argued with that. I said Leslie Howard was a marvelous actor, but if he had tried to play Buffalo Bill, it would have been silly. On the other hand, I could play Buffalo Bill fairly easily, and I wasn't anywhere near as good an actor as Leslie was. Well, she hated Wellman. She hated working on the film, and this was, in fact, her only film she made with Wellman, and it was a tortured set. Everyone was arguing. They were on the road a lot. Everyone was arguing. Anthony Quinn, who plays the Indian Yellow Hand in the film, hated Wellman so much that they got into a fist fight on the set. A lot of drinking going on too while they were making the film. Linda Darnell was cast as Dawn Starlight, the doomed Cheyenne maiden who was in love with Cody. And studio publicity claimed that she had Cherokee blood. Not a drop, of course, total hogwash, but she was obviously not the first person to claim Native heritage. Although a school teacher and far better educated than Cody, the chasm of race dooms any hope of romance between them. She rides with her Native brethren at Warbonnet Gorge and is killed. And actually, in a quite little poignant scene, Cody carries her body from the battlefield into camp, and a soldier says, "Was she a friend of yours, Bill?" To which he replied, "They were all friends of mine." And indeed, the whole film revolves around Cody losing his fame because he defends the Indians, which is not incorrect. He doesn't lose his fame in reality, but he was a huge defender of Native rights and felt that the Indians had received a terrible deal from the government, which of course is absolutely correct. In the final film, Cody is played as a typical kind of frontier innocent right out of James Fenimore Cooper. And the image of the Indian is also right out of Cooper, as they are portrayed as a terribly wrong people, terribly wronged people. No Western cliche was left unused as Cody rescues a stagecoach, saves Senator Fredericki, played by Maroney Olson, who had played Buffalo Bill in the Barbara Stanwyck film, and his beautiful daughter, Maureen O'Hara. And of course, they get married. The poor Indian girl is bereft with grief over this. And then Cody, when Custer is wiped out, has to go and fight with the army again. And she says, if you do, I'll leave you. But a man, of course, has to do what a man has to do. And off he goes to win fame at War Bonnet Gorge. And she goes back east where their son dies of scarlet fever, which Cody sees as a disease of civilization. And so this leads to their separation. So at least actually they show in the film that he had a troubled marriage, which was indeed true. Impoverished, he goes and works in an arcade where Ned Buntline discovers him, and along with Louisa, they all put together the Wild West show. Where they get the money for it, who knows, you know? But nevertheless, he becomes a triumph, and here he is in the final scene of the film, waving goodbye to the fans. In the final performance of the shown here, he says goodbye to everyone, to the audience, as he and Louisa are going to the west and the setting sun. And a little boy on crutches rises in the audience and shouts out, "God bless you, Buffalo Bill." Oh, jeez, love that scene. Wellman said he almost threw up when he filmed it. And he hated it so much that ever after, he would use that line to sarcastically remark on some unfortunate event that transpired. "God bless you, Buffalo Bill," was his line, and it became his signature line. Kind of bless your heart. Yeah, pathetic person. Well, Buffalo Bill, and here's McRae in his kind of geezer, makeup to play Buffalo Bill. Looks pretty good. Buffalo Bill was a huge financial success, making close to $1 million profit despite its high production cost. And the critics were even mildly generous. The New York Times said Buffalo Bill was a fantastic legend, and 20th Century Fox has done nothing to tear it down. So indeed, this was the one big film that celebrated Buffalo Bill's frontier career, but that was all about to change. The next film that featured Cody would have a decidedly different impact on his shining legend, and it would prove equally successful at the box office. Annie Get Your Gun premiered on Broadway at the Imperial Theater on May 16, 1946, with Ethel Merman as Annie Oakley and William O'Neill as Buffalo Bill. It was an instant hit. It ran for 1,147 performances. It spawned several revivals, as well, of course, as the splashy MGM musical film in 1950 and a live television broadcast in 1957. The success of the musical not only made Broadway history, it also changed forever the image of Buffalo Bill Cody from a buckskin-clad frontiersman into a sequined showman. It was famed songwriter Dorothy Fields, the composer of hundreds of hit tunes for Broadway and Hollywood, including The Way You Look Tonight, I'm in the Mood for Love, and A Fine Romance, who came up with the idea of a musical play about the sharpshooter Annie Oakley and her career with Buffalo Bill's Wild West and her romance with her husband to be Frank Butler. She wrote about her and her brother Herbert that when they set to work on the storyline for the Broadway show, we did a lot of research on Annie Oakley and Frank Butler, and both of them apparently were about the dullest people in the world. Annie Oakley in real life used to sit in her tent and knit, for God's sake. The writer's vivid imaginations would make up for this dearth of lively historical fact. Well, it's ironic that Buffalo Bill's Wild West, an entertainment phenomenon of the 19th century, should in turn inspire Annie Get Your Gun, an equally important 20th century show business success that helped to dramatically change American musical theater forever. This is the shift away from the Ziegfeld Folly kind of shows that were just a series of big show tunes kind of tied together with dances and comedy, interspaced, into what are called story shows that, or book shows that told a story. Irving Berlin was signed on to do the music. He didn't want to do it, but he was the most famous songwriter in America, and they felt that they needed his talent. The story of Annie Oakley meant nothing to Berlin. He was uncomfortable with the very idea of the musical, or situation show as he called it, and he declared he couldn't write hillbilly stuff because he's a New York Jewish guy. I mean, it doesn't fit in with all. So Oscar Hammerstein, who was producing this, just went to him and said, Irving, don't worry about it. He pointed out to Berlin that all he needed to perfect hillbilly songs was to drop the G's on words ending in ing. Have you noticed how politicians do that all the time? It just drives me nuts. So a guy goes to Harvard and suddenly he's dropping his G's when he's giving a speech. Berlin remained skeptical, and his partner Rogers said, "We barely made a dent in the guy." But nevertheless, armed with the script, Berlin retreated to the confines of an Atlantic City hotel with his musical arranger, worked for a week, and produced 6 songs that included Doing What Comes Naturally, You Can't Get a Man with a Gun, They Say It's Wonderful, and There's No Business Like Show Business. Hillbilly music indeed. So there we go. Despite Berlin's remarkable creative powers, problems continued to plague the show, but nevertheless it opened on Broadway in May of 1946, and the sophisticated first-nighters all thought it was hillbilly stuff. It got terrible reviews, and there wasn't a good response. But again, the only audience that mattered came in droves, and it became a huge Broadway success because the people, not the critics, the people loved it. Well, it went on, resulting in 9 hit songs for Irving Berlin, and then went on the road with Mary Martin as Annie Oakley, and played simply forever. Well, a motion picture was inevitable. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer paid $600,000 for Berlin's score and the Fields book. Louis B. Mayer saw it as a perfect vehicle for his star, Judy Garland, and planned to reunite her with Frank Morgan, her Wizard of Oz co-star. That'd be great, the Wizard of Oz and Buffalo Bill, the same actor. But just as filming started, Frank Morgan had a heart attack and died, and so he had to be replaced, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Judy Garland also had to be replaced. She was going through a difficult divorce. She was medicating herself with pills and booze, and she argued with everybody on the set, and she was actually fired, as was Busby Berkeley, the famous musical director who was fired from the film as well. And so she was replaced with Betty Hutton. No relation. Whose real name actually was Elizabeth Thornburg, from Battle Creek, Michigan. And she had been a band singer, and she had done a few successful musicals before this on film. And she was filming Let's Dance with Fred Astaire when she received the offer to do Annie Get Your Gun. It was her dream role. And she received a decidedly cool reception on the set because everyone blamed her for Judy Garland getting fired, and so that didn't help. Frank Morgan, of course, died right at the same time, and so he was replaced by Louis Calhern, who had just been nominated for an Academy Award for playing the Magnificent Yankee, about a Supreme Court judge. And Calhern had made only 3 westerns before this, but one of them was The Red Pony in 1949, in which he essentially looked just like Buffalo Bill in that movie, and so off he went. Cast as Sitting Bull in the film was J. Carrol Naish. The Irish-American character actor often played ethnic roles as diverse as Chinese detective Charlie Chan or the Mexican General Santa Anna. Ironically, he also completed John Ford's Rio Grande in 1950 as well, where he played General Phil Sheridan, famous for saying, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." And then later, in 1954, he once again played Sitting Bull in a fanciful biographical film called Sitting Bull. Naish was one of Hutton's few supporters on the movie set. He said that she was great in the movie, and here's the whole cast. And of course, the scene where they meet Queen Victoria. Well, the movie was a huge success. Hutton made the cover of Time magazine, and most agreed that her folksy, high-energy performance captured what audiences wanted to believe Annie Oakley was like. Nothing like the real Annie Oakley. I mean, it's kind of a, backwoods Davy Crockett kind of humorous, twangy character, but nevertheless, it worked. And of course, it left filmgoers with a lasting impression that the white-maned Cody was first and foremost a creature of the stage, lost forever. In the rousing chorus of "There's no business like show business" was the image of the buckskin-clad, youthful frontier hero. So this just changes Cody's image forever. He becomes the showman, not the frontiersman. Well, and the show went on. Here's Mary Martin, who was the Roadshow Annie Oakley, and who later did the show on television. This television show is still available if you want to see what the real stage show looked like, because several numbers were cut from the latest version of it with Bernadette Peters that ran on Broadway, and you can see it has much more of a cheesecake appeal to modern audiences. What's better than a beautiful girl with guns? And so there we go. And this revival was a huge success, although several numbers that made modern audiences, they thought, uncomfortable, like "I'm an Indian Too," were cut out of this show, including the song Colonel Buffalo Bill, which is the opening song of the original musical. Well, Buffalo Bill returned in a handful of B-westerns in this period. The only big western made about him was Charlton Heston. It was not called Buffalo Bill here in America, as it was, as you see on this poster, in Europe, but it was called Pony Express, and there is Charlton Heston as Buffalo Bill. He's Moses, he's Andrew Jackson, he's parting the Red Sea, and he's winning the West. He portrayed Cody. The real Cody was 14 years old when he rode, briefly for the Pony Express. But as you can see, he's much more mature here. And along with Forrest Tucker as Wild Bill Hickok, he tames the ladies. She's fainted from just being near him, and wins the American West. And along the way, he even has time to fight the duel with Yellow Hand. Who knew that occurred? Not in 1876, but in the 1860s during the time of the Pony Express. And interestingly, the Indian in it was played by Pat Hogan, who played the Indian leader Red Stick in Walt Disney's Davy Crockett just a few years later. Well, several B-westerns were made featuring Cody of the Pony Express, with Dickie Moore as Cody. And nothing, though, on the kind of scale that you would expect for a character as important as Buffalo Bill. And Dickie Moore went on to, Dickie Jones went on to play Buffalo Bill Jr. in Flying A's 1955-56 television series produced by Gene Autry. And Gene Autry, and that's his sister Calamity Jane in this short-lived television show for Kitty Fair. Gene Autry also produced Annie Oakley with Gail Davis, which was more successful, and of course had absolutely nothing to do with the real Annie Oakley, and everything to do with Hollywood. And she doesn't sing in this one either. Some more B-westerns. Richard Arlen, Buffalo Bill, rides again. Here's Clayton Moore, who played the Lone Ranger. Look at that square jaw. And he did 2 Buffalo Bill movies. This is Buffalo Bill in Tomahawk Territory. Several Europeans films made about Buffalo Bill. Here's Gordon Scott in Buffalo Bill, Hero of the Far West. And a very, one could say, interesting, but really awful movie was made in 1974 called Don't Touch the White Woman, with French actor Michael Piccoli, who also produced the film, playing Cody, alongside Marcello Mastroianni as General Custer, and Catherine Deneuve as the untouchable white woman of the title. This absurdist reimagining of Custer's Last Stand climaxes in a modern Paris excavation site with Vietnamese refugees cast as Indians. Director Ferrari found it amusing that, quote, the conquerors are eventually wiped out. He said, that's what happened at Little Bighorn and what will happen tomorrow, I hope, everywhere. I don't know if the new mayor of New York is related to this guy or not, but he was very proud to be a Marxist. So nothing like a Marxist history of the American West. From the French, what could be better than that? Fortunately, this film is in the dustbin of cinematic history where it belongs. Although it is so awful, it's kind of neat to watch. It's like watching trains collide. Bill appeared in cameos in films like Lash LaRue's King of the Bullwhip, but nothing really important until Arthur Coppett's play Indians appeared on the stage. And Altman's absurdist exposition on stardom and manifest destiny, Buffalo Bill and the Indians, or Sitting Bull's history lesson, loosely based on Coppett's play Indians, was to be the last major Western to interpret Buffalo Bill. Coppett's critically acclaimed play, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, had opened in London and then played in New York at the Brooke Atkinson Theater. It was a huge critical success. Here's the Saturday Review cover story on it. And Coppett envisioned his play as a critique of the Vietnam War. He said, I wanted to expose the madness of our involvement in Vietnam. I had believed for some time that what was happening was the symptom of a national disease. And so his venue to do that was to attack Buffalo Bill and his Wild West show. He wrote, Buffalo Bill's stroke of genius was to get real people from Western history into his show, to get Sitting Bull to play himself, to get the Indians to play themselves, to recreate Custer's Last Stand, to show the Deadwood stage. And so Buffalo Bill became involved in the dilution of history because he made what happened into a fiction and he used real people to fictionalize themselves. That's actually pretty insightful. So he's at least thinking. He's thinking through this, which is more than I can say for Robert Altman, who produced the movie based very, very loosely on the play. The play's kind of interesting. Dino De Laurentiis, the successful Italian film producer of such heady fare as Barbarella and Mandingo, enjoyed mixing in some high-end fare on occasion. And so he signed the critic's darling of the time, Robert Altman. Altman had cut his teeth in television westerns, and then it had his breakout hit in 1970, MASH, which he followed up with McCabe and Mrs. Miller in Nashville. And he was at the very top echelon of film directors at this time. And so he co-wrote the script and used Coppett's play as the jumping off point for Buffalo Bill and the Indians, our Sitting Bull's history lesson. Altman's snarky bicentennial gift to the country featured Paul Newman as the fraudulent star and Burt Lancaster as his cynical creator, Ned Buntline. So huge cast of important stars at the time. There's the cast photo. Here's Mr. Blue Eyes himself. I guess he probably is as good looking as the real Buffalo Bill was. He's probably coming as close as you can. The whole film is really not about the West or the fate of the Indians. It's about show business. And it's about the tortures of being a star. All those private planes, all those mansions, all those trips around the world, all the beautiful people you hang around with. Then tax problems, So no wonder they're all a mess. And so that's kind of the point of the film, which is itself a mess. I hate this movie so much. Can't even believe I'm foisting pictures of it on, but it's astonishing. It's a real period piece, you know, showing kind of the self-loathing that America was engaging in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, and how everything is bad. Everything about the country is bad. Everything about our heroes is bad. And it's a time when other debunking Westerns were being made about Billy the Kid, Wyatt Earp, and others. And there's Burt Lancaster as Ned Buntline, Geraldine Chaplin as Annie Oakley. And there's a wonderful scene in which she's arguing with him to be nicer to Sitting Bull, who's joined the show. Sitting Bull wants a more truthful recreation of the history of the West in the show. And so she says to Cody, but he just wants to show people the truth. You can't allow that just once? Annie asks Cody, to which Cody responds, no, I got a better sense of history than that. And so it goes, although it's very difficult to pick up on any of the dialogue in the film, because if you've watched much Robert Altman, you know he just lets people improvise, and there's dialogue over dialogue. So you can never tell what people are saying. Well, the film was a failure at the box office, and it was our last major show about Buffalo Bill. Throughout the late 1960s into the 70s, the American people began to reassess the conventions of frontier heroism and progress that had been so casually depicted in the Western film and television. When the violent divisiveness at home caused by the Vietnam War and continuing racial issues tore the country's social fabric apart, people began to question our history, and of course, we still are. The rise of the Indian Civil Rights Movement after the Alcatraz occupation, the Wounded Knee Standoff, led many Americans to denounce the past treatment of Native peoples, and the incredible success of D. Brown's 1969 book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, just added to that, as Americans now embraced a new national story that acknowledged a troubled racial past. The rise of environmentalism led to a questioning of wilderness conquerors and especially famous hunters like Buffalo Bill, so that old heroes were reinterpreted in the Western. Cody kind of escapes this outside of the Altman film. He escapes it because he's identified as a showman, not as a frontier hero like Davy Crockett or Kit Carson or General Custer. Altman's film was essentially the last cinematic word on Buffalo Bill. He made a few cameos in other films that were produced over the years, and there was a brief television series called Young Riders, which was a knockoff of Young Guns, and had a Buffalo Bill character in that. It also had Josh Brolin as a young Wild Bill Hickok and Stephen Baldwin as Cody. So, but alas, and there were documentary films, this one, which I happen to have written, made about Cody during this period. But despite his pivotal role in the creation of the Western as modern entertainment, Cody's screen appearances pale in numbers compared to the films produced about 20th century creations such as Wyatt Earp, 37 films, Billy the Kid, 75 films and 2 TV series. These Western characters also attracted more star power. While Joel McCrea, Charlton Heston, and Paul Newman were certainly big-time A-list stars, they hardly compared to the list of star power brought to the tales of Billy the Kid, Robert Taylor, Audie Murphy, Marlon Brando, Paul Newman, Chris Christopherson, Val Kilmer, or Wyatt Earp, Randolph Scott, Henry Fonda, Ronald Reagan, Joel McCrea, Burt Lancaster, James Stewart, James Garner, Kevin Costner, Kurt Russell. The gunfighter, the lawman, and the outlaw have proven far more popular in the Western film, as had the trailblazing frontiersmen who helped to build the nation. The films that featured Cody as the central character were either budget froth or dealt with him in show business. Annie, Get Your Gun forever altered the iconic image of Cody the frontiersman to that of a show business caricature who became an easy target for parody. Well, more than a century after the passing of Buffalo Bill, his celluloid reputation remains mixed, even confused, by the seemingly contradictory characters, the frontiersman and the showman. He, of course, was both. But that's a little too complex for Hollywood. In the 20th century, the connection between the flesh and blood hero and the show business star has been lost. Ironically, the Western film owes everything to Buffalo Bill, yet with few exceptions, it hasn't repaid the debt very well. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Hutton? Any questions for Dr. Hutton? Yes, sir.
Is Buffalo Bill still well known in Europe?
It's very well known in Europe, and in fact, Disney Paris had Buffalo Bill's Wild West Arena show as their big dinner theater show that ran for 20 years until COVID kind of shut it down. But yeah, he's incredibly famous in Europe and still remains kind of an icon of America, both as a showman and as a frontiersman, because they took the frontier image seriously. Of course, obviously the Marxist interpretation of that then turns it on its head, because we wouldn't want to have any progress in the world. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming. Please check out Paul's book upstairs. Look for our dates in 2026. Have a good afternoon.